I'm Sari Cooper, a certified sex therapist and sex coach in New York City. I'll be your host to Sex Esteem, a new show where we will explore in all its expressions relationships and sex in the modern world. Tune in for fun-filled facts and entertaining tips to having a more pleasurable sex life. Welcome to a new installment of Sex Esteem with Sari Cooper. And I am so excited today because I get to talk to a new colleague and friend, Oona Metz, who just came out with an incredible book called Unhitched, The Essential Divorce Guide for Women. And we share our academic background is similar. We're both clinical social workers, but why don't you tell me a little bit, just a brief sort of summary of kind of your background and how you came to this topic?
Great. And thank you so much for having me on today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Um, I've been a therapist for about 30 years. And about 15 years ago, I started leading divorce support groups for women in my private practice. And I started three of them, and all three of them are still going today. We meet every week for 15 years. And I just had amassed so much information about the emotional journey of divorce during that time that I was finally like, I have got to write this down. I have to give it to a wider audience. It's so, all the things that I knew about divorce were so helpful for the women in the support groups, but I knew that I wanted to bring it to a wider audience and that it would be helpful. So that's how the idea for the book was born.
So, I want to talk about just kind of the some of the stats you give at the beginning, and then I want to kind of veer into kind of the latter half
Yep.
of the book, which we'll
Great.
about. But kind of some of the stats that you talk about in terms of who are the common initiators of divorce in heterosexual couples in America.
Mhm.
What did
Mhm.
you find there?
Yeah, so there is some research that shows that for people who initiate divorce, it's in straight couples, it's 69% of the time it's women who initiate. Um, so there's a lot of ideas about what that means. And if you ask, guys on the internet, they'll tell you it's because women want money. And so they initiate divorce, which is not actually the case for anybody I've ever heard of. Uh,
But in your groups, I'm just from a clinical standpoint, what are some of the reasons women have given when they come
Mhm.
in that they initiated divorce?
Right. So I think we know that there's like in the old days, we would always talk about the three A's as the causes of divorce, which are affairs and abuse and addiction. And certainly I'm seeing a lot of that in my practice. But, I see other things too that are a little more nuanced. I mean, I think one big factor is kind of some of the inequality that's baked into straight marriages, where the woman is kind of the default person who does more of the parenting, more of the housework, more of the kind of emotional labor. Um, and so the women that I see are really talking a lot about that. And then I think the other thing that I hear an awfully lot about is men who've become very passive in their marriages. So they're either like, I practice in Boston, which happens to be a pretty highly educated place. There's a lot of universities here, there's a lot of education here, but a lot of these women who are also highly educated themselves are married to guys who have long periods of unemployment or underemployment or are employed but just very passive in the marriage or in the house.
Mhm.
So those are the things I'm seeing the most.
Hmm.
in my practice.
So the feeling is I'm already alone in this
Yeah,
marriage,
I'm doing,
or this family. I might as well like explicitly be on my own. And is it that kind
yeah.
of feeling?
Yeah, a lot of women say to me, I feel like my husband is another child rather than an actual full partner. And, women have made incredible progress in terms of income and career. And a lot of women, can go it on their own at this point. And I think we haven't, in our society, we haven't set up the mechanisms for men to kind of catch up. Like women have made all this progress. And I think men haven't really caught up in the same ways, in the kind of parenting and emotional connection ways. So I think there's a gap there.
Right. I mean, in my practice, I see a lot of couples in crisis. A lot of them have to do with affairs or sex
Yep.
marriages. Um,
Hmm.
you mentioned infidelity, which we know from the research is also a big sort of precursor to divorce. But
Hmm.
what about sexless marriages? Is that something
Mm,
I've heard about it from your clients?
absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
want to set something up because sometimes, frequently people will assume in a heterosexual marriage that it's the man that's coming in and complaining about it, which is
Hmm.
true. But I'm
Hmm.
also wondering if you hear this other side, which I'm trying to sort of lift up,
Yes.
has a place to be heard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm hearing about it a lot. Sexless marriages before divorce, usually for years and years and years. And I'm hearing about it from both sides. I mean, I see women in my practice, but I'm hearing that sometimes it's the women who give up on sex, and sometimes it's the men who
Mhm.
give up on sex. So I'm definitely hearing about it a lot. And I think the other thing I'm hearing about is sometimes women who are coming out of sexless marriages assume that they no longer have a sex drive. Like they just think their sex drive is done. And sometimes that's coinciding with menopause. We're seeing a lot more what's called gray divorce, divorce after 50. Um, and sometimes when they get out of the marriage, they're realizing, oh, actually, I do have a sex drive. It's just I was so bogged down in my marriage that I didn't then, but now with this new kind of freedom, I do have a sex drive. And that's not all the time. Some people are like, whatever, I'm just done with sex. But yeah.
Well, I see a lot of those women too, and it's a confluence of events, which is maybe
Hmm.
they're not getting the menopausal treatment and hormone therapy offered
Hmm.
to them from by their gynecologist, or they've had
Hmm.
sexual pain and it wasn't diagnosed and treated properly, and or they weren't getting the sex that they really were enjoying because they had
Yeah.
years and years of duty sex, which,
Yes.
over time presents itself as low desire in a
Right.
therapist's office, but we know that if you're having more sex that's conducive to your own erotic pleasure and sexual pleasure that's for
Mhm.
you, then
Yes,
suddenly that libido comes charging back.
that's right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, so let me go to some of my first questions.
Yeah.
Really what I want to, you've done some great interviews, Una, like really amazing. And I encourage
Mm.
audiences to check her out um, but I wanted, because of kind of this sort of overlap of some of the issues that we both treat, and I think it'd be
Hmm.
helpful for clinicians to hear about this as well. I
Yeah.
want to focus today on the latter part of the book
Hmm.
around
Yep.
dating.
Yes. Good.
Yeah. So one of the sort of cautionary sort of sections is you say go slowly. And
Hmm.
so I wanted to start with that and then
Hmm.
I'll follow up with another question. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think so. One of the things I have found is that oftentimes women coming out of divorce have a tender heart. And sometimes they want to date what I would say is too quickly because they want to not feel the pain or the grief of ending the marriage. And so they want to be distracted. And I think distraction is great, but only in certain, not if it's becomes an avoidance tactic, right? Like I'm not expecting you to be grieving your marriage 24/7, right? Like a little distraction can be really good. Dating can be very distracting. And I do have some women who say the first breakup that they have after divorce is actually even more painful to them than the divorce, because I think they've been in the divorce process for such a long time that it's almost like, or a bad marriage for such a long time that they've kind of lost some of that, it's not quite so much of a loss, right? And then they have this new exciting relationship post divorce. And when that ends, they feel like crushed because it was full of hope,
Right.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then you said something which I thought was fascinating, and I wanted to get into it with you.
yeah.
Um, so one of the reasons you also cautioned women to wait is the
Mm-hmm.
legal implications. You said you
Mm-hmm.
advise some women you should check with your attorney if you're in a high
Mm-hmm.
conflict divorce process. So,
Yep.
is this based on sociocultural legal beliefs and expectations still inherently against women having sex before the divorce is final? I
Mm.
was so curious about this. And
Right,
given that
right,
you're on
right.
the therapeutic front lines with your clients, I'd love
Mm-hmm.
to hear
Mm-hmm.
what you've witnessed regarding that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think, legally, I mean, I only work in Massachusetts, so I don't know about kind of red states, and certainly judges are different. I don't think there's many judges in Massachusetts who would care if people are dating before they're actually legally divorced in the divorce process. It's a no-fault state. They don't really care. But what I more meant is I think there are certain kinds of high conflict divorces where if you're negotiating back and forth an agreement and you're really close to being done, and you have the kind of spouse who's looking, or the kind of ex who's looking for any kind of thing to throw a wrench into it. So it's not that you shouldn't necessarily date, but you shouldn't date in such a way that your spouse finds out if you're in that kind of a high conflict and you're kind of almost done. Because I have seen cases where they're just about to put the finishing touches on a legal agreement that they've been working on for years and years and years. Suddenly, the ex finds out that she's dating. Nope, I'm not. We're going back to the drawing board. I'm not doing it.
Out of
So
spite or jealousy
yes,
or
uh,
envy,
uh,
even if he's
or
gone on and dated
yes,
or in a
exactly.
relationship,
Yes,
right?
a narcissistic wound. Yes, that is too big to repair. So that's the caution, rather than just like, it's not that it's illegal to date, but and I don't have any moral. I mean, I kind of say like everybody should decide what their own moral thing is, right? Like I don't have any moral stance on whether you should or shouldn't. I think it's up to every person to decide. There's some people who are highly religious who think I can't date until I'm fully legally divorced. That's totally cool. And some people who say, oh my God, we've been separated for years. Of course I'm going to go date. Totally cool. So whatever your thing is, you
Right.
should do that. But just be careful if you think your ex could really use it against you financially or in the agreement, in the legal agreement.
I was curious about what the percentage was in most of your groups in terms of the life stage, because you mentioned
Hmm.
gray divorce, which is sort of like this
Yeah.
um,
Yes. And the new term.
new
Yes.
term. But I'm wondering what the major like do you have different ages and they're different life stages? Yeah.
Mhm. I do, but it is more heavily biased for people in their 50s and now 60s. I've gotten a lot of referrals for women in their 60s recently. And I've certainly seen women in their 30s and 40s, but oftentimes they're not quite old enough to have gotten married and gotten divorced at that point.
Right.
So, I mean, I see a lot of people getting divorced when their kids are teenagers or going off to college. That's kind of one of the most common times I see people.
It is a big inflection point, I think, that period of time
Yes.
when if you have children in the house and they're about to go off to college, and it's sort of like, yeah, it held on to kind of
Uh-huh.
launch them, and then
Yes.
now you're looking at your life and going, what's
Right.
the rest going to look like for me, and what do I
Yes.
want, right?
Yes, yes. And you have a joint enterprise, right? When you have kids at home, and you still are parenting all the time, but I think it's a different kind of parenting when your kids go off to college.
Yeah.
Um, it can be also if it's not if it's not your choice to initiate the divorce, I have found that some women who come in and the divorce is not their choice and they're facing an empty nest, that can be really tough, especially if they're stay-at-home moms and they're kind of losing their marriage, they're losing their identity as wife, they're losing, maybe their house and their kids are going off to college all at the same time. That's like a kind of triple loss that can be really hard to deal with. And once they're able to really do the work of grieving, can also be a real opportunity, you
Mm.
know, for some growth and healing and, doing something like a second chapter. Because we know divorce is an ending, but it's also a beginning, you know?
Right. And they can't necessarily see or imagine what that will look like when they're in the throes of it because
Correct.
it's so painful. And I agree. Like, I think people sometimes rush into something else because they're trying to bypass the pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, so once a woman has decided she is ready emotionally and legally and romantically, you
Hmm.
have this lovely exercise in the book titled
Hmm.
"Date Yourself First." And
Yes.
can you talk about some of your reasons underlying this exercise? By the way, everyone,
Yeah.
this is this book has all these prompts after all these kind of sections. So it's not like so much download of reading. It's like a
Hmm.
little module and then a prompt so that you can take this at your own pace and it's like
Right.
a conversation, right?
Yes, and then vignettes too. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. And I did that on purpose, and I'll answer your question in a second. But I just want to say I did that on purpose because a lot of women going through a divorce or anything else that's very stressful tell me that it's very hard for them to read.
Hmm.
So I had to think, as the author of this book, how do I write a book for women who have a hard time reading, right? And that's the reason I did it that way. So you get a little chunk of information, a little vignette, and then a little exercise so you can reflect, and then a little chunk of information, and on and on and
I
on.
mean,
Yeah.
I got to tell you, at an earlier stage in my life, when my kids were like under 3, I
Yeah.
didn't read a book. I didn't, and I'm a
Correct.
big avid reader. I didn't read a book
Yeah.
for 3 years,
You
and
can't.
I'm out of the stage when I was like, oh, I can actually get through the book, and I started a book club. I was so excited. I
I
could
know.
only read like magazine articles or newspaper articles.
Yes, right, because that's all your attention could hold, right? Right. I remember the first time I was able to read a book on a plane again when my kids were old enough that I could be on a plane reading a book. It was heavenly. Okay, but anyway, we digress. We digress.
Yeah.
So to just get back to your question about dating yourself first, I think especially for women, I think we are so socialized to think about what everybody else needs and wants, right, in life. And
Mhm.
so we're socialized to think about what our spouse wants, what our kids want, and what they need, and what our boss needs. And we often come last in the priority list. And so I think, again, as I was saying, like divorce is an opportunity to do it a little differently and for growth, right? And so when I say date yourself, I really mean before you involve another person who's going to have their own wants and needs, can you figure out what it is that you actually like? What do you actually want? What do you like to do? So I guide you through this exercise of like, what would your perfect date be? What do you what brings you pleasure and what brings you joy? I sometimes even will tell women like, I want you to take a slow walk around the grocery store and really pay attention to like what are the foods that you really love that you have been overlooking for the last 10 or 20 or 30 years because your ex didn't like, whatever, broccoli. Your kids don't like spices, whatever. You've been eating leftover chicken nuggets or, whatever it is. Like, what do you like to eat? What are those things that kind of light you up? Because I think it's important to figure that out before you then join with somebody else who's going to have their needs. And it's going to be easy to say, oh, well, you like pizza? Okay, well, let's go to the pizza place for our date. Rather than really thinking, actually, I really like Thai food. How about we go to a Thai food restaurant,
Right. Yeah. I'm gonna like piggyback off of that with the pleasure, right? Because it also relates to sex.
Yes,
Like, so
absolutely.
women like have given up on sex with their partner. They've also given up
Oh,
self-pleasure or solo
on
sex.
pleasure.
So I'm
Yes,
pleasure. And so it's
yes,
like I don't even know what
yes,
I like anymore. It's been so long. And my
yes.
husband is different now. So I still don't, I don't even know what this
Right,
configuration
right.
itself
Right.
actually enjoys, right?
Right, right. Yeah. So spend some time dating yourself in your own bedroom as well, right? Or wherever you like, in your kitchen. I don't care, wherever it is that you like to do to explore your own body.
And
Yeah.
the other part of it that it kind of reminded me of was, and Esther, my colleague Esther Perel, who also
Love
came
her.
up through the family systems world like I
Hmm.
did. Um, I don't know if it was in one of her talks or in Mating in Captivity, but she had this prompt of, you know, would you date yourself? What do
Mm-hmm.
you find? Do you find yourself interesting?
Yep.
Are you
Yep.
interested in something new? Like, really, as kind
Hmm.
of this challenge to people who
Hmm.
have gotten kind of in these routines and
Right.
without internally saying, what am I interested in? What do I bring to
Hmm.
the table? And so
Yes.
it reminded me of that a lot, actually. So
Yeah.
I really thought that was really important, a key, and it takes a while. Uh,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and it then also goes into this next part which you talk about, which is, especially since your cohort of women are 50 and over and
Hmm.
they're going through menopause or post-menopause, and we know bodies change in menopause,
Hmm.
and there's so many sort of insecurities that
Hmm.
crop up at this time that's very commonly
Yes. Yes.
cause women to feel less than, less
Right.
visible, less
Right.
sexy, comparing themselves,
Less firm.
less firm.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if I were, for as a fly on the wall, like what were women in your group contending with, and
Hmm.
were they willing to talk about that part of them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We talk about everything in these groups, everything. Yeah, yeah. And I think that does come up a lot, really, the worry about, my body is so different than it was 30 years ago when I got married. And oh my God, what are people going to think of that? And one thing I do is just to remind them, like, well, are you going to be dating a 25-year-old? Maybe you are, which is cool, but they're usually not. So I say, don't forget, that person's body has changed too, right? That's one of the things I say. But also, like, what are the things you can do for yourself that make you feel good about yourself? It might be, I mean, even something as simple as a new haircut or a new undergarments or like what can you do to bring out that feeling of being attractive again, right?
Right.
And I
And
find that a lot of women feel like um, their bodies, like if they're 55, for instance, and they've been married for 30 years, they feel like their bodies are 55, but emotionally, when they go back out on the dating scene, they often feel like, I feel like I'm 25 again. Like I don't quite know how to do this. And the landscape has totally changed in the last 30 years in terms of dating. Like they weren't on apps before. We kind of laugh about like the old days of like putting ads in the newspaper, right?
Right,
There used to be
right,
dating ads in the newspaper.
right. Which was
Yeah.
actually, I think, at a certain period of time was considered a questionable in
Yes.
some circles, if you will.
Yes, yes, yes.
So
Well,
like
certainly some newspapers, yes, more than others. Right, right, right,
was for
right.
like really just straight ahead dating,
Yeah,
personal ads.
yeah.
I think they were still
Yes,
kind of looked down upon as kind of déclassé,
right,
in some.
right. Yeah.
Um, so I wondered about, right, we know that the rates of STIs a few years ago were increasing for the
Hmm.
over 50 set and the over 70 set, actually. Um,
Hmm.
how do you, that's something that, when you've been in a long-term relationship and you have
Right.
been using barrier methods, like how do you counsel women on this? And I think you
Hmm.
do talk about it in the book. So.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just think it's really important to give women permission that they are allowed to ask to see those results. They're allowed to ask, they're allowed to insist upon birth control methods or as some method to prevent an STI, and they're allowed to ask for test results. That is standard request, and you're allowed to do that. And that's not something that they did 30 years ago. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think you could get tested quite so easily. So, but these days you can, you
right,
know?
right.
Yeah, yeah.
I would add to that, and what I would add to that is that you are entitled to not agree to every sexual uh, e- behavior as a
Yes.
way of
Hmm.
like deciding what your safer sex menu is, right? Because
That's right.
so you may not want to go down on someone and give them oral sex, and you may not want them to go down on you.
Hmm.
A barrier method, even, uh,
Yep.
because you don't know them yet.
That's right. That's
You
right.
don't know them. You don't know how trustworthy they are. You could
Hmm.
have already been through a marriage where your partner was lying
Hmm.
to you for years, you know.
Yep.
So you're coming at it in a way of being, more savvy. But
Yes.
that's still a difficult thing for women to ask and to,
Yep.
sort of set that boundary.
Right. I think, and I have an entire chapter in the book about boundaries because it's also, again, I mean, your boundaries with your ex will change during a divorce. So that's obvious. But I think a lot of other boundaries change too. And I think it's an important exercise to be thinking about what you want your boundaries to be and to think about them ahead of time and communicate them, right? Nothing wrong with that. And if somebody's not going to respect your boundaries early on, I say, thank goodness you found out early, you
Mm.
know, and see ya. Like, it's good to know that that's the way that person is and don't be with them anymore, you know?
Kind of, I mean, I've heard from my clients where, they've asked a new partner to wear a condom and they'll say, well, I can't stay hard if I have a condom on. Are you sure you need
Mhm.
this? I was just
Mhm.
tested a while ago. Um, what kind of stories, did women bring in to the group
Mhm.
when they started dating?
Definitely similar to that. I hear a lot about ghosting
Hmm. Tell us about
in in
ghosting.
the early stages or even the middle stages that people are, just they disappear. So you have some great dates, and then all of a sudden the person is gone and just doesn't respond anymore to messages or blocks somebody and it just kind of comes out of the blue. Um, and that can be really, really painful, really painful.
How do you prepare the women to anticipate that that might happen?
They prepare each other. That's one of the nice things about the group is that we usually have one or two people who are in the dating stage. People are at all different stages of divorce, and usually there's one or two And so they are kind of the big sister in the group, and they will tell the other people, which sites to go on and which sites to stay away from, and to warn them about ghosting, and just also to warn them about being careful about how much kind of fraud and deception there is out there, and how important it is to meet somebody in the early stages rather than carrying on a texting or phone call relationship with somebody for a month at a time. Um, so yeah, they act as the big sister in the group, and really help kind of bring the other people along if the other people are interested in dating, which some are and some aren't.
Yeah. And what about in terms of, one of the complaints I hear about with my clients who are single and dating is that the focus of these dates, they'll go out with if they're straight, they'll go out with a guy
Mhm.
and he'll just go like launch into all this stuff about himself or about his ex or about,
Uh-huh.
and nary a breath to stop and ask her about herself. Um,
Yep.
and I mean, that may be a turnoff initially, but there may be
Mhm.
something fascinating about that to women. So I
Mhm.
wonder kind of how that is dealt with in the group.
Mhm. Mhm. Great question. Um, so I think I think in my group, people have been pretty turned off by that, um, by just ending up being kind of the listening post for the guy. And I think they have identified pretty quickly that it's pretty much of a red flag if a guy they're dating is just complaining about his ex. I mean, talking all the time about his ex, right? That's a red flag, but also kind of throwing her under the bus, or, oh, she's so crazy and you wouldn't believe all these things she's done. I think they figure out pretty quickly that that's a real red flag.
Yeah, right. Without any understanding of how that's coming across to a new person, even,
Right,
right?
right.
And also playing the victim, right? It's
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And in terms of once people start to develop relationships, um,
Hmm.
well, before I even do that, was there, is there, I mean, because you are a longstanding member of AGPA, which is our
Yep.
Association for Group Psychotherapy, is
Hmm.
American group, yeah.
American Group
Right.
Psychotherapy
Um,
Association. Yep.
so in terms of process as a group
Hmm.
leader,
Hmm.
do you hold there, does it come up between the women themselves,
Mm.
that there's some sort of judgment around dating
Mm.
sex, or even if it's coming from a place of wanting to protect the fellow
Uh-huh.
group, but
Yep.
does, I'm just curious if that comes up and how you as a group leader like
Hmm. Yeah. So the protection issue definitely comes up, whether it's with their ex or with a new date. Absolutely. I think, it's interesting because I run just straight therapy groups as well as the divorce support groups, and I would really make a um, distinction between the two is that we're not in the divorce support groups, we're less focused on process and we're more focused on content. And I work very hard to create, and I think do a good job of creating a very non-judgmental environment. And it really is it is my belief system that everybody's doing the best they can, that everybody has a unique marriage, everybody has a unique divorce, and everybody's going to go through it in their own timeline and in their own way. So I think that kind of gets infused into the group. And because it's not a process group, I'm not pulling for, oh, gee, Mary, I saw you raising your eyebrows when Cynthia was talking about that thing. Are you having some feelings about what she's doing? Like, I'll do that in my therapy group, absolutely. But I'm not going to do that in the divorce support group because they're really there for support of going through a divorce. They're not there for kind of character change or, uh, like a therapy group, if that makes sense.
right. So, are there ways in which the members help each other, and you obviously, prepare for the sexual kind of, next stage of sex?
Hmm. Hmm. I think most of the ways that we help the members is really by just being a place where they can talk about it and not be judged, you know. And there are some women who just want to go out and have as much sex as they can. They have been in a sexless marriage and they're like, I just want to go play the field. I want to have sex with men. I want to have sex with women. I want to just do it all, and they'll come back and talk about their experiences, and we listen in and support them where they need support. And then other women who are like, I'm never ever going to date or have sex again. I just don't want to. And I always say to those people, like, that's totally fine for you for now, and I encourage you not to decide about your future right now. Like, that could change. Like, don't cut yourself off forever. It's totally fine if that's not your thing right now, but don't cut yourself off forever.
And the other thing I think that's an interesting inflection point is when partners either, in either whatever if they're in a heterosexual relationship or if they're in a same gender relationship, start to what emerges is their attraction for a same gender partner that has
Hmm.
never really been a part of the conversation or even maybe their own sense of themselves. So in other words, like
Hmm.
sometimes marriages end when one partner comes out or
Yep.
realizes they're bisexual and wants to explore that,
Yep.
those clients. Um,
Yep.
and then there are people who, once they are done with the divorce,
Hmm.
start to allow themselves.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah,
So,
I've definitely had a bunch of those people. More so leaving the marriages because they realize they're attracted to other women rather than afterwards, but certainly a couple of those too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I
And
think,
that's, it just adds another layer of complexity to it in terms of coming out to kids and coming out to the spouse and, facing whatever judgment there is from family members or whatever. So, um, yeah,
right.
both complexity and freedom. I think a lot of people feel like, well, I can finally be authentic, or this is a part of myself that was repressed for so long.
Right. And I think some people are even, I mean, I've seen both. I've seen people who always kind of knew that they were attracted to same gender
Hmm.
and they just put it away. Um,
Yep.
But then I've seen people who really, it only came up in the last year or two. And it's like that's
Hmm.
such a new realization. It blows their mind,
Right.
you know, what to
Yeah.
do with that. But I wonder if they have to now kind of really take their time and live in the closet still because
Mm.
there are children involved, or because that
Hmm.
divorce is happening forever with a
Right.
spouse that would do damage if they knew, kind of thing.
Right. Right. I think it really depends case to case on, if they feel like they need to keep it under wraps or not. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where the group could be is so valuable because
Oh, so valuable.
I could take a breath and just talk about this.
Yes, yes. I mean, the group is so helpful in that way. And I think people have been so respectful of the confidentiality. And I always have them, we have an agreement before they come into the group. I always meet with them twice individually. They have an agreement that they sign about confidentiality. They have an agreement they sign. We talk about what their goals are going to be, to kind of guide them through the group, what their intentions are. Um, so people have been really wonderful about that. And one of the things I notice the difference between my therapy groups and my support groups, the support groups actually, I think women are so desperate to talk. They come in and they're so open so quickly, like they really bare their souls right away, right away. And I think they feel so relieved to be surrounded by other women who really get it, that they just go really deep, really fast. Whereas with my therapy group, People get deep, but they take a long time to get there. They kind of take more time to build trust and then they get there. But with the divorce support groups, they go there right away, right away.
And I wonder if what happens in instances that where a member of the group, they've been a part of the group for months,
Mhm.
and then they have a reconciliation with their,
Oh, yeah, that's happened.
that does happen. What's that?
Yep.
What happens in the group? You know,
Yep.
does the person then have to leave the group? Like because
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
found this new home and then,
Right. 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 Um, so one time it happened that there was a reconciliation and we all celebrated because it was actually a good thing. And I don't know, I didn't follow up, so I don't know what ended up happening. But there have been other times where people have had a reconciliation or like I want to give it one last try, not exactly a reconciliation, but like I feel like in order to so that I don't feel regretful, I'm going to go back and just do one more round of couples therapy or one. And sometimes those people leave for 6 months or so, and then they call me and they're like, okay, I'm ready to come back. It didn't work out. I mean, I'm really of the belief, like sometimes people will say, like, oh, you're a divorce therapist. Are you just like pro-divorce? Well, yeah, I'm pro-divorce if you have an unhappy marriage, but I'm also pro-marriage. I'm pro being happy, right? So, I mean, if somebody can fix their marriage, fantastic, right? If you can be happy and be married, that's great. And I want that for people. And I always recommend to people that they do as much as they can to fix their marriage or improve their marriage before they decide to divorce so that, either they're going to fix it and it's going to be great, or they're not going to fix it, but they're going to feel like, okay, I did everything I possibly could, you
It,
know?
it's a you and you experience
Yes,
that just
yes,
feel like the integrity of
yes,
having kind of
right.
given it your
Yep,
all and that
yep,
turned over every stone and it's
yep, yep. I mean, sometimes women will call me and they'll say, I'm in couples therapy with my husband and we're working on our relationship, but I don't think it's going to work out. So can I come to your group? And I say, no, not yet. I say, I'm happy to put you on a wait list. I'm happy to talk to you if things change. But I don't want to be in a position where you're in a divorce group and you're working in couples therapy to save your marriage. Like, I think those two things are kind of cross purposes. And that's not respectful of your marriage to be in a divorce group if you're actually trying to improve your marriage, right? So I'm absolutely happy to talk to you if you've made the decision, right? But if you're still working on it, like go work on it, right? Don't have one foot in and one foot out.
which is different because we used to run a group. Right now, we're not running it, but we used to run a coaching group called the Recovering from Betrayal Trauma for Women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, and we had women at all stages, just
Yes.
discovered 4 months later, 2 years later, and we were very deliberate in saying, you can be
Uh-huh.
ambivalent.
Anywhere.
You don't have to have made any sort of decisions. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting group because they were
Yeah.
very different places. So they could like
Mm-hmm.
reflect, like see the reflection of all the parts
Yes.
of them that were ambivalent about,
Yes. That's so good.
yeah, which
So good.
I think is a valuable tool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
outer sort of society, there aren't that many places where you can sit with that ambivalence for a long time besides therapy, and certainly in group,
Yeah.
it allows you.
And I think that's one of the loveliest thing about this group is that somebody can come in and say like, I cannot believe that my ex just did XYZ. I am so angry. I'm so angry. And I also miss them, you know? And we can say like, yeah, of course, right? Like, because they can't really say that to their best friend or their sister, because their sister or the best friend is going to be like, oh, I'm so angry for that guy. You
Yeah.
shouldn't miss him. Don't miss him, you know.
Right.
But in the group, like all feelings are welcome, you know?
And that gray area of like, there were parts
Totally.
of your life that were,
Yes.
nurturing or comforting or joyful. And, you really have to be able to hold all of it and be
Yes.
in the gray.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's so valuable to be able to have that kind of nuanced conversation, you know, and have people accept that and just say, like, yeah, makes sense.
you know, um, for people who aren't therapists who are watching this, I one question I get all the time, and I don't know if you get this, because I see couples, right, as well
Mhm.
as individuals, they'll say, do you ever tell someone they should end their marriage?
Right, right, right.
Hey, that's not my place
Right.
to make that recommendation. It has to come from
Oh,
one or both partners
absolutely.
to make that decision. I'm
Yeah.
there to kind of guide them to this, give
Hmm.
them things to try and guide them to,
Hmm.
you know,
Yes.
determine.
Make
Yeah.
their own decision. Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, I, there's sometimes where I wish I could tell them, but in those cases, I'm just keep reflecting back. Like, what's that like for you to have, your spouse do that again after you just told him not to? Like, this is important information. That's something I say a lot. So let's, that's important information that you're telling me and that you're learning about yourself or you're learning about your spouse. That's really important. Yeah. Yeah, but I'm not going to be in the position to tell somebody, which is, what again, the criticism that's been lobbed at me from guys on the internet is, oh, you're just somebody who tells women that they should get divorced, or you're making money because you're telling people to get divorced. Well, no,
Oh, it's sort of
that's
like,
never happened.
right. It's sort of like sex educators and therapists, right? That get,
Right.
if you do, I do talks for parents, right? And so
Hmm.
commentary can be online like, oh, so you're telling these teenagers to go and have sex because you're pro-sex. No, I'm actually educating the parents so that they can have really good information to give to their kids so that the kids can
Right.
protect themselves, be mindful of what they're looking for, not
Absolutely.
protect themselves against non-consensual experience. I mean,
Yeah. 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 Right. Right. As if those kids would have never had sex if you hadn't come along.
well,
Oh,
in terms of like driving lessons, right? Just because you're giving your kid driving lessons is you're not giving them the keys to the car,
right, 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 right.
educating them. They have to practice and
Oh,
make decisions and all of that.
yeah, yeah.
So this has been wonderful. I highly recommend the book, whether you're a layperson or you're going through it yourself. And if you're a clinician, I think it should be on
Mhm.
all of our bookshelves as a great resource because the prompts are really helpful. They're concise, but they get to the point really well. And they can start a whole conversation in your therapy room. So
Mhm.
I want to thank you so much. And
Aw,
I'll include like links below. And
great. Thank you so much.
it was so great to meet you in person when you were here last week. Was it a week ago?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was actually last week. It's unbelievable to say that, but was last week. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. And it's been a great conversation. And I also just want to say, if it's okay, I have a lot of free resources on my website, which is unametz.com, and a lot of emotional resources, podcasts, writing, legal, financial, if you're going through a divorce, resources. And you don't have to put your email in to get any of my resources. They're just free out there. So I invite people to go hang out there anytime.
Great. And you also supervise, right? You
I
supervise,
do.
which is a great
Yeah.
thing for therapists to know. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, my wait list for my groups got up to 60 women trying to get into my groups. So I started a training program and now I have a training program. So I'm training other therapists how to lead these divorce support groups.
Oh, that's
So
great. And that's also
yeah,
on your site.
on my website. Yeah.
Oh, good. All right. All
All
right.
right.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I'm going to be sharing this far and wide in my New York therapy circles as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.